The reason most people never become wealthy isn't that they don't make enough money. It's that they're pursuing wealth while completely misunderstanding what wealth actually is. What if I told you that one of the wealthiest women I've ever encountered lived on just $1,700 a month for over 30 years? And that I've met billionaires who are significantly less happy, less free, and therefore less wealthy than she was? That might sound contradictory, but by the end of this video, you'll understand why it's absolutely true, and how this insight could completely transform your relationship with money forever. Every day, millions of people wake up feeling trapped in a financial prison of their own making. They chase higher incomes, better job titles, and flashier possessions. Yet somehow, the freedom they're searching for remains just out of reach. Many even achieve what society defines as success, only to discover it doesn't deliver what they thought it would. The problem isn't their income or their assets. The problem is their definition of wealth. We've been sold this narrative that wealth equals possessions: the fancy house, the luxury car, the designer clothes, the social media-worthy vacations. But something deep inside us knows that's not true. That's why so many materially rich people still feel poor on the inside, constantly anxious, and forever chasing the next thing that might finally make them feel secure. I've spent years studying both the mathematics and psychology of money, and I've discovered something remarkable. Most of what we think we know about building wealth is either completely wrong or dangerously incomplete. If you've ever found yourself making more money but feeling no freer, if you've wondered why financial success hasn't brought the peace you thought it would, or if you're still at the beginning of your journey and want to avoid the traps so many others fall into, this video is for you. Because today we're going to completely reframe how you think about wealth, freedom, and what it truly means to be rich. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This wisdom echoes through the centuries because it reveals a profound truth about money that most people miss entirely. True wealth isn't measured by how much you own, but by how much freedom you have. The real measure of your wealth is not your net worth, it's your independence. Independence to make choices based on what matters to you, not what others expect. Independence to weather storms without panic. Independence to say no to things that don't align with your values, and yes to what does. This philosophical lens transforms how we see money entirely. Instead of asking, "How can I get more?" we begin asking, "How can I become more free?" Consider this. A person making $50,000 a year who only needs $40,000 to live has a $10,000 annual freedom fund. Meanwhile, someone making $500,000 who needs $510,000 to maintain their lifestyle is effectively in deficit. They're less free despite having 10 times the income. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical mathematics. And once you understand this principle, you'll never look at your finances the same way again. The traditional definition of wealth is simple: how much money you have. But this definition is deeply flawed. Consider two people: a billionaire CEO who works 80-hour weeks, constantly stressed, unable to disconnect, dependent on shareholders and regulators, always worried about the next quarter's numbers, and whose schedule is so packed they can't even decide how to spend their own Tuesday afternoons. A woman with modest savings who has complete control over her time, lives simply but comfortably, and feels zero financial anxiety. She wakes up each day and decides exactly how to spend her time. Who is truly wealthier? The billionaire has more money, but the woman has something much more valuable: independence. This isn't just about retirement or financial freedom, as it's typically discussed. It's about having control over your life right now. Each dollar in your savings isn't just money sitting idle, it's a token of independence. It represents choices you can make, emergencies you can handle, and opportunities you can say yes to. As investor Morgan Housel puts it, savings without a spending goal isn't just cash sitting idle. It's a fee you pay for independence and autonomy, the ability to make decisions without being beholden to someone else's approval. This is why simply increasing your income often doesn't make you feel wealthier. If your expenses grow along with your income and you remain dependent on that income, you haven't gained independence. You've just upgraded your cage. When you look at extreme examples like Warren Buffett, a multi-billionaire who still lives in the same modest house he bought in 1958 and drives an ordinary car, you begin to understand that the wealthy don't see money as something to spend on possessions. They see it as something that buys independence. Buffett could own any house on earth, but he values freedom more than status. The practical application starts with asking yourself, does this purchase increase or decrease my independence? Often, the status symbols we chase actually restrict our freedom rather than enhance it. That luxury car payment doesn't just cost money, it costs freedom. That bigger house doesn't just require a bigger mortgage, it requires giving up pieces of your independence. What if instead of asking, can I afford this, зрение, вы начали спрашивать, сделает ли эта покупка меня более или менее свободным? When you study the wealthiest individuals throughout history, one pattern emerges clearly. They had extraordinary endurance. Warren Buffett didn't become wealthy through brilliant stock picks or get-rich-quick schemes. What made him extraordinary was his patience. 99.9% of Buffett's net worth was accumulated after his 60th birthday. Not because he suddenly became smarter, but because he let compound growth work its magic over decades. The same pattern appears with Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and countless others. Their success wasn't about a single brilliant moment, but about sticking with something good for an uncommonly long time. Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, once said about Bill Gates, "There are a lot of people smarter than Bill Gates, but nobody has more endurance than Bill Gates. He will outwork you every single time." We often celebrate the dramatic success stories, the overnight millionaires, the viral sensations. But these are statistical anomalies. The much more reliable path to wealth is consistency over time. This principle applies universally. In investing, average returns maintained for an above-average time period will outperform exceptional returns that can't be sustained. An investor earning just 8% for 40 years will end up with more than twice as much money as someone earning 15% for just 10 years. In business, a moderately successful company maintained for decades will create more wealth than a shooting star that burns out quickly. Rapid growth often comes at the expense of durability, like a tree growing too fast to develop strong roots. In careers, consistent progress in a field compounds your value exponentially compared to constantly switching directions. Expertise and reputation built over decades create opportunities that no amount of short-term hustling can match. Most people dramatically overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. This impatience leads them to abandon perfectly good strategies just before they would have started working. The practical application is to ask, am I building something that can endure? Rather than seeking the highest possible returns or the fastest growth, optimize for sustainability. The question isn't, how can I get rich quickly? But how can I put systems in place that I can maintain for decades? Remember, speed and endurance are typically trade-offs. The faster you try to grow, the less likely you are to last. And in the game of wealth, the last person standing almost always wins. One of the great paradoxes of wealth is that some people with very little feel rich, while others with millions feel poor. The difference isn't in their bank accounts, it's in their minds. Consider this surprising truth. My grandmother-in-law lived on nothing but Social Security for 30 years, about $1,700 a month. She had essentially no savings and no assets. Yet, she was one of the happiest, most content people I've ever known. Happier than many billionaires I've met. Why? Because she wanted very little. She was perfectly content tending her garden, reading library books, and taking walks. She had very little money but wanted even less, which gave her a feeling of abundance. She had what philosophers throughout history have called psychological wealth. Meanwhile, there are people earning millions who feel perpetually behind, always lacking, never enough, because their desires consistently outpace their assets. As economist Thorstein Veblen observed over a century ago, once our basic needs are met, consumption becomes about status competition, trying to stay ahead of others in a never-ending race. The feeling of wealth comes when what you have exceeds what you want, not when it exceeds what others have. Chuck Feeney, the founder of Duty-Free Shoppers Group, who made $8 billion, provides a fascinating example. In the 1980s, he initially lived the billionaire lifestyle, private jets, mansions, yachts. But after a few years, he realized it wasn't making him happy. He decided to live simply, giving away almost all of his fortune while living in a one-bedroom apartment and flying coach. What makes his story particularly instructive isn't that he chose extreme frugality. That's a personal choice. What matters is that he had the courage to define wealth on his own terms rather than accepting society's definition. When asked why he lived so modestly despite his wealth, he said, "I simply decided that I had enough. How many cars can you drive? How many pairs of shoes can you wear? This isn't about settling for less or suppressing your ambitions. It's about understanding that contentment is an internal state, not an external achievement. It's recognizing that every increase in your income doesn't need to be matched with an increase in your spending. The practical application is to cultivate awareness of when you're caught in comparison. Ask yourself, would I still want this if no one else knew I had it? If the answer is no, you're chasing status, not happiness. And remember, the cost of anything isn't just the price tag, it's also the freedom you give up by allocating your resources to that purchase instead of to your independence. Few forces in the universe are as powerful, yet as misunderstood, as compounding. It's not intuitive to our brains, which is why so many people miss its life-changing potential. Here's the critical insight. Compounding isn't about the rate of return. It's about time. Albert Einstein allegedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, saying, "He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it." Whether Einstein actually said this is debated, but the truth of the statement isn't. Consider this example. If you invest $100 per month at an 8% return, after 10 years you'll have about $18,000. Not life-changing, but after 40 years at that same rate, you'll have over $349,000, nearly 20 times as much. The mathematical difference between pretty good and life-changing isn't the amount invested or the return rate. It's time. This means that your ability to remain in the game, your endurance, is far more important than your ability to pick winners. When Warren Buffett was young, he wouldn't get haircuts because, in his mind, that $2 haircut would cost him $10,000 when compounded over 50 years. While I'm not suggesting you skip haircuts, this mentality reveals how differently wealthy people think about time and money. What's truly mind-blowing is that if you take even moderate savings and compound them over decades, you can achieve what seems like mathematical magic. A 25-year-old who invests $500 monthly until age 65 at 8% would accumulate over $1.5 million, yet they would have only contributed $240,000 of that amount. The other $1.26 million comes from the power of compounding. The practical application is to shift your focus from maximizing returns to maximizing your time horizon. Ask yourself, am I making decisions that allow me to stay in the game for decades, not just years? This means avoiding excessive risk, maintaining reasonable lifestyle inflation, and creating financial systems you can stick with even when they're boring. Because in compounding, boring is beautiful. One of the most powerful ways to increase your wealth isn't to raise your income, it's to raise your humility. Modern consumption is largely about signaling, buying things not for their utility, but for what they communicate to others about our status. We spend enormous sums trying to impress people we don't know and who, frankly, aren't paying attention to us anyway. Harvey Firestone, the tire magnate, once wrote in his biography that every rich person he knew, including himself, bought a house far bigger than they actually wanted or needed. He asked, "Why do we do this?" His conclusion, it was purely for status, not utility. He admitted these oversized mansions were actually burdens that made their lives worse, not better. Yet, they all did it anyway. The reality is that most people are far too concerned with their own lives to notice or care about your possessions. That expensive watch or luxury car that you think is broadcasting your success. Most people either don't notice or don't care. The moment you realize this truth is incredibly liberating. You suddenly understand that you've been spending money on an audience that doesn't exist. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said, "If you want only to be happy, that is easy. But if you want to be happier than other people, that is almost impossible." This insight has dramatic financial implications. When you stop buying things to impress others and start buying only what truly improves your life, your expenses drop dramatically while your satisfaction increases. It's the closest thing to financial magic that exists. The practical application is to regularly ask yourself, who am I trying to impress with this purchase? If the answer is strangers or people I don't even like, you've found an area where humility can increase your wealth and freedom. Try this mental exercise. Imagine if everyone on Earth disappeared tomorrow except you. What possessions would you still value? What spending would you still find worthwhile? The answers reveal what truly matters to you versus what you're doing for social signaling. Now I want you to imagine what your life would look like if your financial decisions were guided by one question. Does this increase or decrease my independence? Imagine if instead of chasing more income, you focused on keeping more of what you already make. Imagine if instead of impressing others with what you own, you impressed yourself with what you've built. Imagine if you stopped playing status games with people you don't care about and started playing freedom games with yourself. The truth is, most people will never make this shift. They'll keep chasing external markers of success and wondering why happiness remains elusive. They'll keep upgrading their lifestyle with each raise, not realizing they're building a more expensive prison. But you now understand that true wealth isn't about having more. It's about needing less. It's not about impressing others. It's about impressing yourself. It's not about accumulating possessions. It's about accumulating choices. You now see that every dollar you save isn't money stagnating. It's a piece of your future freedom you now control. Every expense you avoid isn't deprivation. It's liberation. Think about all the supposedly wealthy people who collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis or during COVID. What they discovered too late was that they didn't have wealth. They had illusions of wealth. They had income and status symbols, but they lacked the independence that constitutes true wealth. In contrast, think about people you know who weathered those same storms with minimal stress, not because they had more, but because they needed less and had built true financial independence. The question is, what will you do with this understanding? Will you continue chasing what others call wealth? Or will you begin building what truly matters, your independence? Will you measure your worth by your possessions or by your freedom? Will you optimize for appearance or for reality? Will you spend your life impressing others or actually living it? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're the most practical financial questions you can ask. I'd love to know which of these ideas resonated with you the most. Was it redefining wealth as independence, the power of endurance, or perhaps the psychology of contentment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspective might help others on their journey to true wealth. If these ideas made you think differently about money, consider subscribing to Millionaire Brain, where we explore the mindsets and philosophies that create genuine prosperity, not just financial success. And if you know someone who's caught in the trap of chasing wealth but finding only stress, share this video with them. Sometimes a new perspective is the most valuable gift we can give. Remember, before you can have wealth, you must first be wealthy in your thinking. The millionaire mind starts within. Until next time, think deeply, live freely,